Hi, I'm Adam, and I'd like to talk to you about performing live and quantized with the Prophet 6. I like the idea of having both a human element and a machine element in a live performance. So we're going to talk about human performances where the timing is controlled by a computer. Specifically, I would like to talk to you about a technique that I hadn't seen demonstrated yet, which is using the external trigger input on the Prophet 6. But before we do that, I'd like to show you some of the other options available on this synthesizer. I'm going to start out by taking this factory patch here. I'm going to modify the amplifier envelope so that we don't have any sustain in the note. I'm just doing that because I want to have control over the separation between the notes, even though I don't have precise control over the length of the trigger or the gate. So let's first take a look at the arpeggiator. I'm going to turn it on, set it to 1 octave, the up pattern will work fine, and 8th notes. Now when I hold down notes, they will play with perfect 8th note precision. Note that I can still change the sound as it plays. Or hold down chords and it will arpeggiate them. Another fun trick with the arpeggiator is that you can play a chord for each note. I'm going to hold down a chord, a minor chord, and push the unison button. Now each note on the keyboard plays a minor chord. And with the arpeggiator it works too. Another fun trick to try is to turn on the glide. Turn on the glide. So that's something else you can try. Also, there is a sequencer, and each patch has a sequence that goes with it. It is a step sequence of notes. This is the one that comes with this patch, and you can transpose it in real time by holding record while it is playing. So that's another way you can play live and quantized. The arpeggiator and sequencer have limitations though. The arpeggiator is going to play a note on every single step. Whatever you have the clock set to, the note is going to trigger exactly on that step. With the sequencer, you can also have rests. So you can have notes or rests in your sequence. You can also have more than one note at a time in your sequence. But neither of these is going to allow you to play outside of the grid-like timing that is set here in the clock section. However, you can go beyond these limits with an external trigger source. To demonstrate this, I'm going to plug in a foot pedal. Here's the foot pedal here. And you can control what this foot pedal does by going into Settings, the second row of Settings, and choosing Sequencer Jack. There are several options here. You have Normal, which starts and stops the arpeggiator or sequencer when it's engaged. You have Trigger, which triggers the next note for either the arpeggiator or sequencer. I'll show you that one. Let's turn on the arpeggiator, hold down a chord, and then each time the foot pedal triggers a note, it plays the next note in the arpeggio. This is what it sounds like with the sequencer. Besides doing triggers, you can also do gates. This is my favorite one. With a gate, I'll push it once to make sure it's in gate mode. I'll hold down the notes on the keyboard. And you can hear that it is triggering both the amplifier envelope and the filter envelope as if I'm pressing the keys, except that it's perfectly timed to the trigger input. I'm not restricted to one chord like I am with unison. I can change chords. What would be nice is if I could trigger notes, but instead of using the foot pedal, use an external sound source. And in that way, the notes I play would be synchronized to the drum pattern or other instruments in my tune. So let me show you how that works. Here's an Ableton Live project that I put together. There are 2 drum patterns that I programmed. Here's the first one. The second pattern has a stronger backbeat. And in the third row here, I have the 2 patterns playing at the same time. Right now, I'm playing these with straight timing, which is how I programmed them, but I can really make them come alive by applying a groove or swing. In this case, it will adjust the timings of each 16th note. In my Crushed Prophet video, I was using this MPC groove with a timing strength of 55%, like this. I also allowed the groove to influence the drum velocities with a strength of 10%, and added a bit of randomness to the pattern, so it wouldn't be exactly the same each time. For this video, I'll crank up this timing strength to 80% just to make it really obvious. Here it is without the groove. And with the groove. I could sequence the Prophet with MIDI and then apply a groove like I'm doing to the drum track here, but I want to be able to play it live with that groove. To do that, I added a third column to my project that contains a click track. It contains one sharp sound that I will use to trigger the gate in the Prophet. This is what it sounds like. I have the groove applied to this track too, so that it syncs with the drum pattern. Here's what it sounds like if I turn the groove off on the click. I can vary the pattern of the click for each scene in the session. If I change sessions during a live performance, the trigger pattern will change with it. To send this to the Prophet, I route this click track on its own output on my audio interface. I have several assignable outputs on my interface, but even if you don't, you can use 1/2 of a stereo output and pan the click track hard to one side and all the other instruments to the other side. This click track then goes into the Prophet 6 sequencer jack where I had the foot pedal. What ended up working for me is to send a lot of audio energy down the cable. I use a short burst of white noise for the drum sample with a very short envelope. Then I crank the gain into overdrive and gate it. I want a very short, very loud burst of sound. Note that I had to drive my outputs well into the red for this to work. I'm not doing that here because I don't want to damage your ears, but I'll mute this track and show you how it was. I run it like that when the audio is going into the synth. If the signal isn't perfect, it will either not trigger the synth at all, trigger only some of the notes, or it will double trigger with each click. Another challenge is that there's a lot of latency when triggering notes this way. When I send a click out of Ableton into the trigger input of the synth, and then record the resulting sound back into Ableton, it has between 20 to 50 milliseconds of delay. I tried shifting the track delay here, but that didn't work well for live performance because it just makes everything late. I also tried shifting the MIDI notes in the click pattern forward. I used a version of this technique in the Crushed Prophet video, but be careful because it can mess up the way the groove is applied to those notes. My current method is to bounce the MIDI click track to an audio track, and then I shift the audio track forward by ear while listening to the triggered synth until the sound aligns. With this method, everything that I'm hearing is perfectly on time, but the click track is actually being sent to the synth a little bit early. I'm going to play this simple groove here and show you what it looks like on the synth, along with some real-time tweaks, including polyphonic glide, which is fun.